Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is Chapter 11, creating and deploying vApps. So let's first talk about what a vApp is, and let's go back in time. Well, not back in time, but let's go to the non-cloud world. To me, that's back in time. And this is where you have a server or an appliance handling uh, your databases, and you have another one handling, let's say, your domain controllers, another one that's handling your applications. And this would be for a more high-end uh, deployment, a bigger data center, things like that. We're not talking about a small business here, and that's how we would go about. That's how we would go about having these high efficient, high end systems. And in the virtual world, you're still going to have separate VMs that do that, but a vApp allows you to group them together. And I kind of like the way it puts it here. It says you can package all three or more of these servers into one inventory object. And why would I want to do that? Because then I can start setting settings for all of them in common, and I can start controlling them. So for example, if they go down, do I want one to actually power on before the other one? Things like that. And so it's all about pooling these servers together and their services and treating them like one object. Right? And then maybe tweaking it slightly. Now the neat thing about vApps is that once you create what you like, you can clone it, you can use it as a template, you can move it from one host to the next, and so you have so much flexibility. It's just a very powerful idea. Now there are two requirements for vApps. Let me go ahead and just come down here and pull that up. But there are two requirements, and you need to do one or the other. Either it's a standalone host, and it has to have EX 4.0 or later, which we have, or, and this one I think is more important, the host cluster is enabled for DRS. And so what is DRS? DRS is the Distributive Resource Scheduler. It is a utility that balances computing work balancing with available resources in a virtualized environment. The utility is part of the virtualized suite called VMware Infrastructure 3. So in other words, you have the ability to schedule the workload. You have a scheduler that does that for you. Now, before we actually do any of the activities, there is a little bit of prep work we have to do, so it makes sense. You can still do the activities without the servers, but it would be stupid to do that. And so I want to actually build a few virtual hosts and a folder and things like that, just so we can actually, not only so it matches the pictures we have in the book, because that seems to confuse us sometimes when it doesn't quite match, but also I want to be able to show you really how this works. Okay, so here's what the book looks like. We're not going to follow this perfectly. I'm going to call one, app server, the other one's going to be a database server, and the other one's going to be a controller. Um, but it doesn't matter, okay? And because I want to name my servers by what they're intended. Now, bear in mind also that I'm just creating these hosts. They're going to be empty. There's really no real configuration that's been done to them. They're not ready to be a database server. They're just representing one. Okay, so bear that in mind as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up our virtual machine. Just so we have a common place, I'm going to go to our home. And we're going to come in here in VMs and templates. In here, I'm going to click over here on training. I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to say I want a new, it's not going to be a cluster, I need a new folder. Where'd new folder go? And this is going to be a new VM and template folder. To keep it, just mostly because it makes sense, I'm going to call it apps, vApps. So that's our new folder there. And then from here, we're going to create new virtual machines. Okay, so I'm going to say new virtual machine. And we're going to do this 3 times. Okay, and so I don't care too much about it. I say I'm going to name this. Let me just go ahead and grab the name real quick, which will be, let's make this one application server. Okay, so PP. Oops. Okay. I'm going to connect it to the correct host. So let me just get to that. Now, while we're thinking about it, these servers that you're going to group into a vApp, uh, they don't have to be on the same host. And so just bear that in mind. You can have it on separate hosts. We only have one host, so we're fine there. Hit next again. You have to choose which version of EXI, and we're going to leave it on 6.0, 6.6. What kind of server is this? Oftentimes, it'll be a Linux. A lot of vApp third-party stuff is for Linux because Windows is a little bit more inflexible. So you'll find a lot of the tools, things like you have for that are really for Linux. So we're going to go ahead and click again. This is a summary of the hardware that will be on this virtual machine. I'm not real fussed. Normally I would reduce my storage that much, but really it doesn't really matter how much I take, but I'm going to bring it down to 2 because this is just a fake host. There's no reason to do anything other than that. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish, and if I click in here, you'll see we have an application server. The next thing we're going to do is we're create another one. It's a new virtual machine, and this one will say this one is going to be our domain controller. Okay, so let me just put a line there so I know where I'm going. And so I'm going to type in domain does not have an L in it. Domain controller. Hit next again. Make sure we're in the right where we want to be, I should say. We're going to be in this. That's the correct data store. That's fine. We're fine with that. I'm going to move this over to Linux. I just really like Linux. And just for fun, we'll say it's a different one. Now, this doesn't load Linux in it. It just says it's ready for Linux. That's what it expects. You'd have to go to the virtual machine powered on and install Linux. Okay, again, it goes back to the idea that these are just empty boxes, like pieces of hardware that has so much memory and storage and things like that. It's ready to go. It has all this hardware, but it doesn't really have an operating system. And we don't need it to at this point. That's not the point of this. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create one last one, virtual machine. And this was going to be our database, I believe. So let me just put a mark real quick so I don't lose my space. Okay. And so hit next. I'm going to call this data. I've been lowercasing all of them, so I should keep them the same. Database. Server. Okay. And since I'm going fast, I hope it's not lost that I am keeping them in the same folder. I am keeping everything together just for organizational benefit. And we'll just make this one a Microsoft one this time, so we're a little bit different. Okay, we won't go on all these different options. Notice it's red here. It's saying you don't have enough. You don't have enough. Well, now I do. Okay, so it is making sure that we have what we promised. Okay, and we're getting finished. So at this point, we're ready to actually continue the labs. And again, you really don't need to make these to do the labs, but it would make more sense if we do so. One thing I do want to point out is if I click on host and clusters, you'll see that these are in there. Okay, so anything you add here as far as hosts, you will see over here in hosts and clusters. Now what we're going to do is we're going to progress to the first activity and talk about it as we go along. To do that, we're going to go back to hosts and templates, or VMs and templates, I should say. I'm going to right-click the folder, the vApps folder. I'm going to say new vApp. Okay. We're going to just create one from scratch. Okay. And so here is where we get to choose whether or not we're going to clone an existing one. Let's say when you really liked, you had the settings just right, everything you like, and you want to clone it. Well, we're not doing that because we haven't done that before. We have to create the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Okay. Edit settings. You notice how we skipped it? Well, we wouldn't have skipped it if we would have been cloning. So the idea of cloning is you found something you really liked, most of the settings you like, but hey, let's go into the settings just in case you want to tweak it a little bit. Since we're not cloning it, we have no settings, and so it doesn't let us go into this option here. Okay? I'm just going to select the host where I want it. Target close does not support vApps because it does not have DRS enabled. I thought it did. Okay, so I'm going to fix that. So let's go ahead and hit cancel. We're going to have to fix that real quick. Okay, so in order to enable it, we're going to go to host and clusters. I'm going to click on the data cluster. And in settings, I'm going to click over here on vSpar DRS. Then over here, I'm going to hit the Edit Cluster Settings. I'm going to click on the checkbox under vSpar DRS to enable it. This is going to be fully automated, power off. We're not going to worry about any of these other things. We should be fine. Hit OK. Now let's go back to where we were. Right click it. Going to go to, gotta remember what I'm doing, virtual app. Again, we're not cloning it, so we'll end up not needing to tweak those settings. I'm going to select the host, hit next, and we do not get our problem. That's what we want. So as you can see, you really do need that. That really is a prerequisite. We need to have that DRS enabled. Now, normally we'd name it something that's a little bit more descriptive, but we're just going to keep with the book right now because there really is no purpose to it right now. So I'm just going to say vApp 05. That's good enough. Hit next after that. Okay, resources. Okay, so these are where you can start setting up settings. And settings is the wrong word because I don't really mean settings. I mean the resources. You can start talking about low, high reservations on resources on shared things like CPUs, things like that, reservations. Let's see, memory allocations. Okay, things like that. And so you're going to set those, and this is kind of more of an advanced topic, so we're just going to hit finish or next. Okay, this is where you're going to look at and you'll see, okay, what have I done? What choices have I made? Do I want to go back and change it, or do I want to hit finish? I'm going to go ahead and hit finish, and momentarily, there it is, there's our vApp. We can come in here and we can make changes to it, and this is something we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, one thing I want to mention is that we don't have any, these devices or these hosts, I shouldn't say hosts, these VMware boxes aren't in the vApp yet, and all you have to do is just drag and drop them. But before we do, let's click on the vApp and just look. So it's summary, there's really nothing here to see. Monitoring, well, it's nothing to monitor. Let me go over to, let's go to related objects. There's nothing in there. One way you can actually put these devices or these boxes in here, you just drag and drop them in. So I'm dragging and dropping them in. This is the last thing the book does. I prefer to do it first because I want you to be clear on what it's doing. I'm going to drag and drop this one as well. Sometimes it's has a little bit of latency before it shows it up. Same as 104. Domain control. Maybe it's in there and we just don't see it. Let's move it around. There you go. Okay, so it's not showing it on top level, but it's showing it on virtual machines. Okay, so it's there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start managing these. Okay, and so not necessarily managing these virtual machines, but start editing settings and things like that. So the next thing we're going to do is, let me just check the activity so we stay logical. We're going to go ahead and clone it. Okay, so this is simple enough. I'm going to go ahead and right click it, and I'm going to choose clone. Okay, and so let's see, install it in there. Now, one thing I will say is, as you're creating other VMware machines, you can actually deploy them inside of here as well. I'm not going to. I'm not going to have a vApp inside of vApp, but let's just say clone. I'm going to call this vApp 7. Same data store, then provisioning. Okay, here's where you're going to change your different resource allocations. Look at it, we're good with it, and we hit OK. And so it will appear in just a moment. And there it appears. It's right there. You come in here, you notice that we have those servers are all in there. So it's cloned all of that. So you come in here, you'll see we have vApps in here with their own hosts. And here we have host boxes as well. So it shows both in the hosting clusters tab as it does the VM and template tab. So the next thing we're going to look at is how to export the state of your vApp as an OVF. So there are two formats. Let me go to the book real quick. So let's just minimize this. That way we can kind of see what we're talking about. How to get there first. Oh, I went too far. It's not a very long chapter. Oh well, it doesn't matter. What we're going to talk about is the idea you can do it either as a folders of OVF files, which is 3 different type of files. You have the OVF, which is a open virtual format, and it's an open source standard for packaging and distributing software application and VMware VM machines. Then you have your MVDK, which is your virtual machine disk. It is a file format that describes the container for virtual machine disks to be used in virtual machines like workstations, things like that. And so those are 2 of the 3. And then the other type is to do a single file, which is an OVA. And this is best. It's just a single file, and it's best for templates, and it just gives you a single file. The other type that gives you the 3 different type of files, which is folders of files, which is OVF, it would be best if you're going to publish them for web servers or image libraries. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at how you do that. Okay, so I'm going to go to the app, and so we're going to right click it, and we're going to choose OVF template. We're going to say export because we don't want to import it. Okay, we're just going to blow through this. Okay, it's just saying, hey, we have a problem with the plugin. If we try to download, we're not connected to the web, so this may be as far as where it will go. So let me make a note. Okay, and so at this point, let's go ahead and let's just see what the book looks like. Okay, so over here on the book, just like I said, you would choose to deploy, not deploy, I'm sorry, export a template. Okay, after that, you're going to choose which one you're going to do. And again, we have these 2 options. We have more than 1 file, okay, which will give us 3 files that are better for web servers and image libraries. Okay, those 3 different files are these 3 right here. Or you can do a single file, which is better for templates. Okay. Okay. This might be used to explicit download web servers, downloads for websites, blah 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 blah. USB. So this is something where, hey, I want to take it with me. Okay. So we're gonna come in here. We're gonna choose one of the 2, and then we're just gonna click through it until we hit next, because there's really not much we have to do there. So you're just going to review this, see if there's anything you want to change. If there's not, we're going to finish, and we're good there. So, and the reason we weren't able to do that activity is because we can't get internet connection on the pod, so we can't get the plugin. So I'm not going to require that activity, and that will be reflected in the learning modules. Now, we might decide that we want to change a setting to it, change some of the settings to our vApps. And so instead of recreating them, we can just right click it and go to settings, or you can just click on it, go to manage. And actually, I guess there's not. I thought there was an edit settings over here. You can kind of get to it, but it's not really letting me do stuff there. So we're just going to go this way, edit settings. And here we have a very similar looking thing as we had when we created it, and we're able to change these settings. Now you have 3 different groups. You have application properties. This would be if you had vendor specific stuff. So let's say you got most likely from a Linux some kind of Linux distribution, but someone had created, some third party had created, you putting it in your system right here would have their non-editable information, such as their organization name, things like that. Then you have deployment. This is where you'd be able to change resources and IP allocation properties, which we haven't talked about yet. I wouldn't stress that out too much until we get there. And then you have and other resources, I should say. Now, resources is a pretty big section to talk about. And then you have your last one, which is going to be your authoring. Okay, so let's look at resources first. And this allows us to make changes. Okay, maybe we want to fine tune it so our share of CPU is high. Maybe I want to change some memory allocation. Okay. just anything like that. IP allocation. Maybe I wouldn't want to look to see how that is, but I'd actually have to go somewhere else to make changes here. Unrecognized, it basically says it doesn't know where it came from. So vSpar doesn't know what this is. It just knows it is a web app that you've created, but it doesn't recognize it as an official type, official. I do want to go back a little bit. This IP allocation defines how the hosts inside this app, vApp, receive their IP configuration. It could be manual, it could be from IP pool, or it could be DHCP. The last is your authoring. Oh, one second, I don't want to talk about start order yet. So, for example, I can come in here and I can give a name for product, things like that. Let's talk about start order. Start order is kind of cool. Okay, so remember we have 3 different hosts in here. I'm gonna scroll down just a little bit. You have 3 different hosts in here, and maybe I want 2 of them to start at the same time. You know, these 2 to start at the same time. Actually, I'll just put them all together just for now. Okay, and so it puts it in alphabetical order at first. But let's say this one has to start after this one. This one has to start first. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in groups. And I say this one is going to start before these because the domain controller has to be on, otherwise we'll have problems. Now if I wanted to, I could also say, you know what? This one is going to have 15 seconds after it's been started up. This one's going to go 15 seconds. This one's going to be 15 seconds after the next one. Okay? And so I'm able to change that. Oops. I'm able to change it so that they will have wait a few seconds after the other one is fully turned on. That way some services are turned on, that kind of thing. Or maybe I want to go 120 seconds, whatever it is. And so not only can you put them in groups of which one turns on first, but you can also determine how long it will be, how long it will elapse before the next one will turn on. So this one's been on so long, so this one's been on, so this one's going to wait so long until it turns on. Okay. You can also do power off. It's kind of the same idea. Okay, how long will I wait till after power off? And of course none and power on. So that's one way to look at that. IP allocation in here. And this is basically determined in another area as well. So, but I can say DHCP, whatever you want in there. Okay, so we're not going to go too far in there. I really wanted to talk about the start sequence, if you will. And let's see. Trying to scroll down a little further. Okay, so in here, I can control whether or not I'm going to support IP version 4 or 6 or both. I'm going to say both. How is it getting its network configuration? Maybe it's through DHCP. I'm going to say OK. And so I've made changes to it because time has changed, or maybe I forgot, or maybe I'm looking at my environment and it needs to be different or better and that kind of thing. So really in summary, what we've looked at is sorry, I'm looking at something else. We have looked at in general what a vApp is, and that's the biggest thing I want you to see. It's a container that I put a bunch of my hosts, usually servers or some kind of service that I get from a server, in there. So those hosts are now going to be have common settings among them, and this gives me a lot of flexibility. It gives me the ability to have them share resources or have them share processing power, things like that. It allows me to set, hey, let's let this server start before this server, things like that. So it gives you a lot more flexibility. It also allows me to move it from one host to the next. Again, you have that portability of VMware. Remember, the VMware is all about pooling of resources and to be able to recover from loss or recover from a disastrous event. Maybe one of your hosts went down. Well, I can move it through vMotion or something like that, your virtual machine as well. This will all have that same power to it. Okay. All right, so that really does it for Chapter 11. If you have any questions, just email, let me know.